Hello and welcome. This is going to be a quick tutorial on how to get the basics of your OBS set correctly. That way you can do relatively easy screen shares and anything that has to do with streaming. First off, of course, you're going to want to open OBS. You got that loaded up. You may get some prompts for updates and stuff like that. Typically, what you want to do is on first startup, you want to make sure all your settings are set up properly. A lot of the time with OBS, the way it goes is it'll have an automatic configuration for your system, which may or may not be good. That is all dependent on what kind of specs you are running. I'm running an RTX 2070 Super with a Ryzen 5 3600. And it's not the best, but it's obviously not the worst. Typically with this, you might want to upgrade or change your theme. They got several different types, as you can see. My favorite is Yami. Typically, by default, these are all clicked on. This is completely up to your preference. I typically have them off because I don't really need the confirmation that it's going live or it's starting recording. It's relatively annoying after you go through the first bit of streaming. Let me reopen this. When you first go around, you'll obviously customize this to your fitting. There's a lot of preference based. Oh, if you like studio mode, if you want it to be a certain orientation, anything in that gist. If you want it to open in the background on startup, most people don't, but that's completely up to you. This is where you would put your stream key and where you're streaming to. You can stream to all these different platforms. They have presets. Can be relatively important, especially if, say, you started a stream and then you notice it wasn't working or wasn't broadcasting. That would most likely be either on your side, the server side, or it could be your stream key. Most of the time, it's probably going to be your stream key. I know with a lot of content creators on Facebook, they typically cycle the stream key by 48 hours to prevent people from getting access, and you don't really want anyone else to have access to that. It's like having a MAC address. You do a whole lot of damage. Next would be output. It's going to be how your settings are going to be set. I have mine set to advanced because I sort of know the formatting and what my computer can handle. By default, it's usually on, I think this setting is normal or regular or something like that. That's for like those who aren't very format based or know the formats. That can also be a preference as well. Typically, you're going to start on the streaming side, and that's if you plan on streaming. You're going to have all these formats. From my understanding, CQP, which is like constant quality, something along those lines. All these formats go off of different, like, I guess, utilization, what kind of resources it pulls. Like this one is bitrate, so it's based off of bits. I think it runs off of internet, if I am not wrong myself. Then you have presets, and then the tuning, and how many passes it'll go through. Then the profile of like how the computer will prioritize this. So you could set it from main, baseline, so underneath, and then high. And then you'd have stuff like look ahead. And this is basically your encoder is going through and encoding the B frames. And then psycho tuning. It typically just helps with the high motions. Then you get the GPU and the max B frames. Some of the stuff can be tweaked. I typically leave them default because most of the time it's already preset and already encoded. Next would be in recordings. As you can see, it's in standard. You can even change it. I think there's also an advanced mode for this, and it gets really into depth, but I don't recommend it. most of the time what you want to do is you're going to want to have a folder that you have, or you can leave it in the default, which is most of the time it's going to be your what is it, your Windows video folder, or if you're on a Mac, it's probably the default pathway for that. Now, as you can see, there's all these options. Like I could generate a file name without spacing. I could change the format, which I'm currently recording in MP4. I don't recommend this because, as you can see the warning below, in MP4 and MOV, it will not be recoverable if at any point if it crashes or anything along the line of your video not coming to a proper end. So like if for some reason your encoder crashes, it's not going to save the progress. You're just gonna get a corrupt file. The best format to use is MKV in my personal preference, because though it does take a bit more, as you can see, you can have multiple audio tracks. It's easy for you to remix, because all you got to do is go. Let me exit out of this real quick. All you got to do is go up here, and then OBS has a remixer, which is going to convert it from MKV to a format that you choose. I think it's just MP4 by default. That's really good for like if you're using a video editor that only accepts MP4, or I think it's MOV or something like that. Anyways, so as you know, the output has the recording settings as well, and then these are going to be audio tracks that you could set. You can have it isolated, and I don't think it's here, but yeah. So for the audio tracks, you could isolate them. So I have two for, I think I have two for the stream itself. So like what everyone is hearing on that side. No, that's my desktop. That's the desktop audio, and 3 would be my mic. So I'd have these two in a separate audio file, just in case if I have to retweak them. Like let's say I'm playing a game, it gets too loud, and then you can't hear me, so I gotta tweak it. So my gain on my my 3 track is a whole lot better. I typically have it set so my audio track is 1 for streaming, because you have audio tracks as well, but you don't want them to overlap when you're doing recordings, because it could cause a bit of an issue. It's not fun to play with. So audio track I typically leave for 1 for streaming, and then for everything else I have 2 and 3. Those are reserved for separate individuals. So this one would be like my streaming and my talking. I mean, this would be my desktop or whatever game I'm playing and my talking, and this would be my desktop or the game I'm playing, and then it'd be my talking. The way that works is you can go, let's say you have an audio source here, one of these 2 audio sources. I have them in a directory, that way it's easier for me to understand it. You're typically going to go here to the audio mixer. You're going to go to advanced audio properties, and then you're going to set the tracks. So as you can see, this is my mic. I was wrong. It's on, oh, I was right. Yeah, it's on 1 and 3. So it has its own separate file on 3. Yeah, typically when I record, it's not going to catch 1, because then it'll have overlays, and I set it to 2 and 3 only. So for the stream audio, as you can tell, it's going to go 2 and 3, and then that's basically just like my gameplay. I don't know why I have it on 3. It's just basically like my gameplay, and it's going to catch like anything along the lines of, like if I have Discord open, it'll catch that audio. It's all coming from my computer. It's going to go through 2. Now it's because 3 I have set for 3 is supposed to be my stream. I don't know why I reset it on my settings. It's weird. It must have been because I switched the format. Normally it's set to 3. All right. It's important because every now and then if you switch formats, it will definitely change your settings. So you need to memorize these, otherwise kid bite you in the butt. So as I'm going on, what you will notice is the encoder. Encoders, they vary, depends on what kind of components you're running. as I've listed in my recommendations tab, you can have an assortment of different types of processing units, such as CPUs or GPUs. Graphics card, you typically want to do the running, depending on how strong it is, because if you're playing a video game, your the encoder, I mean, for the video game, typically a lot of the workload's going to go on the CPU, depending on how they have the game formatted. Now, you can go through and customize the encoder settings and go further on about that, but unless you know what you're doing and looked into it, I wouldn't recommend changing any of the encoder settings unless you know what you're doing. Next would be audio. You don't want to really change that. Or the replay buffer, you could change that to have replay like in your stream. You could have like a key, or you could have your stream have access to it, and then they could play a replay and have like a little screen that plays like a little video of the last 20 seconds or then on. Another tab here is the audio tab. You want to leave that at 48 kilohertz. Stereo is pretty good. I think you could change it to mono. I'm not sure if that's correct, but typically I use a audio interface, so I don't typically use these. By default, these are usually set up in a way where if you don't have an audio file, an audio source down here, it'll play regardless. So I have it tapered to a way where I can isolate my audio as such, so my mic and my stream audio, and it's all separated, and it comes out very crisp when I go through and edit it. You could change this if you'd like. It's completely up to preference. I use my third party, which is Voicemeeter. It's pretty good if you know what you're doing. It can be relatively confusing later on, but that's something you would have to get into. There's options for ducking and latency. You can even have hotkeys for like muting. And then for the videos, you typically want this to be whatever your screen is. This is wrong because my screen is, I think it's a really weird, I think it's like a 2024, I don't know, it's a weird resolution. It's probably twice this. But typically what you wanted to do is you wanted to have your screen size for the first one, which is space, and the output, which is going to be your viewer's screen size. Most of the time it's just 1920, so that's important. But if you were to like, perhaps if you're recording for TikTok, this would be opposite from what I understand, because it's a 9:16 ratio for the cell phones. But that's for another video. Typically, when you downscale, you're gonna have like bilinear and a couple other versions. I'm not gonna go into that yet because it is important, but at the same time, it's not all too important unless you know what you're doing. Same thing with the frame rates. Frame rates, you got to keep this in mind with certain games and certain videos. Like, unless you're doing gameplay, you probably don't want to do anything above 30 because it could get relatively weird with frame rates. It's not more the better. It basically, it's just how many frames you have per second. That's the literal definition of frames per second. So for FPS, for video games, to catch smaller actions, you typically want more frames. For like, if you're doing like self-recording with like a blog of yourself and camera, I recommend leaving it at around 30, maybe even 24, because that's just how we kind of receive it. Anything faster than like 30 and it's a face cam, it kind of looks weird. There's like tests that'll talk about how they had done a recording in a faster frame per second, and it's just like very janky and stuttery, but that's for another video as well. Here we have your hotkeys. A lot of these are important because these are your safe nets, so you don't have to go through and have to go into your settings. It's really important, especially if you only have one screen, you're streaming to that. you don't want to typically have to multitask or have to pull this up every time, because sometimes when you are in some applications, they screen lock you and they won't let you drift off into another screen for the purpose of usability. As you go through, you could, I don't know what the limit for the key inputs are. I would imagine you wouldn't want to do more than 3, and that sounds like it would get really complicated. But I have it so it's a combination of 2 keys. So I'll have like a combination specifically for my stream. So hotkeys will be like, this one's really going because I don't know many Windows hotkeys that are preset to this by system default. But I use a Shift Alt, and I'll use left and right for like recording. It's dedicated. And then I think of this as my stream is up or my stream is down. There's some other hotkeys that aren't on here because this is updated and then it wiped my settings to default, but that's fine because that's just something we have to deal with. Here is the advanced tab. I think this is a processing priority. So like, if you want this to be over other applications that you currently are running, you put it on high, you put it on below normal. It's just to determine what kind of processing it needs. You don't want to mess with any of this stuff unless you know what you're doing. This is just a format. It's in, I don't know what kind of script this is, but the way it's written is, I think it's like, I think YY is year. So it's like century, year, month, day, hour, then minute, and second. I think that's just like the preset for that's like the default. You can choose to override existing files or automatically remix. This is relatively tedious, especially if it's a big file at the end of your stream. The last thing you want to do is sit there and let this load out, because you could have like my files are typically around like 10 gigabytes per video, and that's only like probably a couple hours probably of film or footage. And if you have this set it on, I've noticed it takes quite a bit of time to process and re-encode it to that format, and it can sit there and I think when it does it for me, it sometimes crashes, so I just leave it alone. I'll remix it when I get ready to edit it. You can have your stream delay, just in case if you're worried about stream snipers, you just enable this, and then you can set how many seconds. It's really good. A lot of these you got to be careful with, because if you hover over it and then you move your mouse wheel, as you can see, it'll change the settings, and you have to go through and reset your settings. This is network. Typically, you probably won't mess with this. You could have this enabled for network optimization. What it'll sit there is it'll probably capture some packages just to see how fast it's going and just optimize how your stream should be set up. I don't normally use it, so I probably wouldn't recommend it. The dynamic changing bitrate, on the other hand, is very useful, because there are times, especially if you're on your stream or in your settings and you're using a bitrate for your encoder, it could fluctuate, especially if your internet isn't good. So like if you have anything around, let's say anything around below 20 megabytes, it's not really good for streaming. It can get very janky because you typically need twice the amount of bit rates. So like if you're doing I think it's like something like this, or is it not? So I'm doing 45 kilobits per second. That's 4.5 megabytes, right? So now if I go through, I need to have I think it's like upstream of at least 9 in order to maintain this properly. Otherwise, it's just gonna go through and be relatively choppy. So that's a good setting. This is for browser source hardware acceleration. There's some like hotkey, so you could tell it how to behave when it's in focus or out of focus. Typically, once you do when you do adjust some settings, you're going to want to hit apply every single time. That way it saves your settings and you don't have to go through and change them once again. That's pretty much it for the basics. Feel free to follow my channel, and for now, happy nightmares.